Look at your hand right now. Go ahead, actually look at it. Whatever shade it is, that color did not come from nowhere. It was not an accident.
That color was earned, fought for, negotiated over hundreds of thousands of years between your ancestors and the most powerful force in our entire solar system, the sun.
And the sun, for the record, was absolutely not playing fair. It never was. It never will be. It simply radiated and let everything else figure it out.
Every single human being alive today, every face you have ever seen, every ancestor in every family tree, all of them started with dark skin.
Not most of them, not the majority, not roughly. All of them. 300,000 years ago, the entire human race was dark-skinned. There were no pale people anywhere on Earth. There were no fair-skinned populations hiding anywhere on the planet. The concept of light skin did not exist yet in humans. It had not been written into anyone's DNA, which means at some point in history something happened. Something so powerful it physically changed the appearance of entire populations across multiple continents over tens of thousands of years. So what was it? Before we answer that, we need to talk about skin itself. Most people treat skin like packaging, like the bag your body came in. But skin is your largest. One of those jobs is the most important thing standing between you and the sun. UV radiation. The sun constantly, relentlessly, without pause, without mercy, and it is not your friend.
UV light breaks chemical bonds. It damages DNA. It causes mutations inside your cells. If those mutations pile up in the wrong places over enough time, they become melanoma. One of the most deadly cancers in existence. The pigment that gives skin its color is called melanin. And melanin is in the most literal biological sense a built-in sunscreen. A natural always-on UV filter your body manufactures inside itself every single day. The more melanin your skin contains, the darker it appears. And the more effectively it blocks UV from reaching deeper layers where your DNA lives. Dark skin is not just a look. Dark skin is a shield. This is why in Africa, under some of the most intense UV radiation on the entire planet, evolution selected hard and fast for dark skin. More melanin meant better protected DNA. Lower cancer risk. Longer life. Natural selection runs one calculation over and over billions of times. Does this trait help you survive long enough to reproduce? Yes, keep it. No, eliminate it. In Africa, dark skin was an emphatic non-negotiable yes. But UV radiation does not just attack skin cells. It attacks something invisible flowing through your bloodstream right now. Something that if destroyed in the wrong person at the wrong moment can end a pregnancy before it begins. The molecule is called folate. Vitamin B9. It is absolutely critical for the development of the neural tube in embryos. The structure that eventually becomes the brain and spinal cord of every human being ever born. UV radiation destroys folate. When UV penetrates skin and reaches the bloodstream, it breaks folate molecules apart. In sun-drenched Africa with no clothing, no shelter, and no sunscreen, UV exposure was constant and completely unavoidable every day. Two separate threats. Cancer and reproductive failure. One biological solution. Dark skin. It blocked cancer causing UV damage and protected folate in pregnant women simultaneously. In Africa, dark skin was essentially mandatory for species survival. If evolution had a review system, dark skin in Africa would have a 5-star rating with hundreds of thousands of glowing testimonials stretching back 300,000 years of brutal real-world testing and survival. So then why did it change? If dark skin is this extraordinary biological superweapon tested over hundreds of thousands of years, why did entire populations end up lighter and lighter over time? What happened? Between 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began leaving Africa. It was not dramatic. No one organized a meeting. No one announced a great migration. It was slow and generational. A group moves a little further than their parents did. Their children move a little further still. Their grandchildren further again. Over thousands of years, humans spread through the Middle East into Europe and across all of Asia. A group moves a little further than their parents did. Their children move a little further still. Their grandchildren further again. Over thousands of years, humans spread through the Middle East into Europe and across all of Asia. Days are shorter. Winters are long and dark and grey. The sky is overcast for months at a time. In northern Europe, the UV environment is radically, dramatically different from equatorial Africa. Almost incomparably different. Instead of relentlessly intense radiation you need to block at all costs, you now have weak, intermittent, desperately needed radiation you must absorb as much of as possible. and suddenly dark skin became a problem. The problem was vitamin D. Vitamin D is synthesized in the skin when UVB radiation hits a specific compound inside your body. Your skin is literally a solar panel manufacturing this essential molecule directly from sunlight. Without vitamin D, calcium does not get properly absorbed no matter how much you consume. Without calcium, bones do not mineralize correctly. In children, severe deficiency causes rickets. Bones soften, legs bow outward, growth is completely stunted. In adult women, vitamin D deficiency softens pelvic bones, making childbirth extraordinarily dangerous. Sometimes impossible. Women with severe deficiency died in labor at dramatically higher rates. The body fails in multiple systems simultaneously. Now put a dark-skinned person in Northern Europe 40,000 years ago. Their melanin blocks UV beautifully, which is brilliant in Africa. But in the grey overcast north, that same melanin blocks the UV they desperately need. Their skin cannot tell the difference between dangerous UV it should block and useful UV it desperately needs. It just blocks. All of it. All the time. So they do not make enough vitamin D, bones weaken. Children suffer. Dark skin in northern latitudes was not just a disadvantage. In a pre-industrial world with no supplements, no fortified food, and no medical interventions, it was a slow death sentence stretched across entire generations of people. And evolution, that cold, merciless, endlessly patient calculator, started doing what it always does. Mutations reducing melanin production began appearing randomly. But instead of being eliminated, these mutations spread through the population. Individuals with slightly lighter skin synthesized slightly more vitamin D, had slightly healthier bones, had slightly higher reproductive success. Generation after generation. Slightly lighter. Slightly lighter. Slightly lighter. Over thousands of years. Not because anyone decided it should change. Not because of culture or preference or social forces. But because in that specific environment at that specific latitude, lighter skin kept more people alive. The algorithm had reversed its inputs completely. For a long time, scientists assumed depigmentation in European populations happened gradually over hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient DNA analysis has completely demolished that assumption and replaced it with something far more surprising and interesting. The most famous example is Cheddar Man. He lived in what is now Britain 10,000 years ago. Ancient DNA revealed he likely had dark to medium dark skin, dark curly hair, and blue eyes. A combination that surprises modern observers completely. The extremely fair skin we associate with northwestern Europeans today appears to have spread widely only in the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. In 300,000 years of human history, that is less than 3%. So what happened 6,000 to 8,000 years ago that suddenly accelerated everything? The Neolithic Revolution. The switch from hunting and gathering to farming. One of the biggest transitions in all of human history completely changed skin color.
Hunter-gatherers ate fatty fish, organ meats, shellfish, among the richest dietary sources. Farming populations ate mostly wheat, barley, oats, rye. Their diet take did not just drop, it collapsed completely. Farming communities were large, dense, and sedentary. In a small band of 50, mutation takes thousands of years to spread. In a village of hundreds connected to others, it spreads in generations.
The combination of dietary vitamin D collapse plus population density essentially hit the fast-forward button on European depigmentation. Within a few thousand years, the skin color is not controlled by a single gene. There is no dark skin gene and light skin gene where one dominates. Skin pigmentation is polygenic, controlled by dozens. East Asians and Europeans both have significantly lighter skin than equatorial Africans. But the genetic variants responsible for lighter skin in East Asians are largely different. They arrived at similar outcomes. This is called convergent evolution, the same adaptive solution discovered independently by separate populations on separate continents.
The evolutionary pressure was so strong multiple times, independently. When evolution keeps reinventing something from signals the trait really matters.
Let's talk about something equally mind-bending: blue eyes. Every single person alive today with blue eyes is descended from one mutation, one moment near the Black Sea region.
Approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, before that individual was born, the entire human species had brown eyes. Everyone. Brown. Nothing but brown as far back as the fossil record goes.
Then this one mutation appeared, a change that reduced melanin production specifically in the iris. And it spread slowly at first, then faster, likely linked to skin pigmentation variants under strong selection pressure. Something as seemingly ancient as blue eyes is younger than the invention of agriculture, younger than Stonehenge, younger than the domestication of a horse. We treat these traits as primordial when they are basically brand new. The version of humanity we think of as normal and fixed is still being written. Let's take a step back now and look at the full picture of what skin color truly represents for everyone. Skin color has defined so much of human history, shaped political systems, divided people into hierarchies for millennia. But at its biological core, it is simply a UV calibration system, a dial, an adjustment mechanism. Light skin is not better in any absolute sense. In equatorial environments is actively dangerous. More UV penetration, more DNA damage, more cancer risk, more folate destruction. Light skin in Africa is a survival disadvantage. Dark skin is not less evolved or primitive. It is the ancestral state, the original configuration, the baseline from which everything else is a modification. If anything, lighter skin is the newer adaptation, the variation. And the deepest irony of all is this. The same sun that drove some populations to develop more melanin to survive its power also drove other populations to develop less melanin because they needed more of it. The sun did not pick sides. The sun did not have preferences. The sun just radiated indifferently and let evolution sort out the rest. We built civilization's prejudice and hierarchy around a vitamin D problem. We built an entire civilization's worth of prejudice, oppression, and hierarchy around a vitamin D problem, a calcium absorption issue, and a folate protection mechanism. Nothing more complicated than basic biology underneath it all. Human populations are still evolving right now, slowly, almost imperceptibly on any individual timescale, but evolving nonetheless. The selection pressures that shape skin color are still present in the environment around us today. We have vitamin D supplements now. We have sunscreen. We have fortified foods, electric lighting, heated houses, and year-round food access from every latitude. We've built a civilization that partially decouples skin biology from its function. The evolutionary algorithm is still running, but we've changed the inputs. What that means for the human species over the next 100,000 years, nobody can say for certain. Evolution does not send newsletters. But what we can say with complete confidence is this. Every shade of human skin that exists today is the product of the same ancient population, standing in the African sun, slowly spreading across an unpredictable planet, and carrying written in melanin the precise record of every environment their descendants passed through. Every skin tone is an answer to a question asked by a star, and that star is still asking right now. So next time you look at your hand, really look at it. You're not looking at a color. You're looking at a story. Hundreds of thousands of years written directly into your skin right now. Your ancestors earned that color. They fought for it. They survived because of it across thousands of generations of constant struggle against sun, ice, hunger, and disease that almost none of them should have survived. And it is yours, exactly as it should be. Every shade on Earth tells a true story of survival, migration, adaptation, and an unbroken chain connecting every human being back to one single origin point. Let's go back to the beginning for a moment. 300,000 years ago, one dark-skinned population in Africa became the ancestor of every single human being who has ever existed on this entire planet. Remember, melanin was never just about appearance. It was a chemical solution to two life-threatening problems at once: cancer prevention and reproductive protection, both solved by the exact same biological pigment simultaneously. Two environments, two completely opposite problems. One molecule had to solve both. In Africa, melanin was a shield. In the north, it became a barrier blocking something the body desperately needed to survive. Every population on Earth ended up balancing the exact same scale. Too much melanin in low sunlight meant vitamin D deficiency. Too little melanin in high sunlight meant cancer and folate destruction. Skin color found the balance. This is why populations living at middle latitudes, places with moderate sunlight throughout the year, often ended up with intermediate skin tones. Neither extremely dark nor extremely light. Nature found the perfect local balance. But there are exceptions. Indigenous Arctic populations retain darker skin despite extremely low sunlight. Why? Because their traditional diet of fatty fish and marine mammals provided abundant vitamin D directly, removing the selection pressure entirely. This proves the theory beautifully. Skin color was never randomly assigned by latitude alone. It was always a negotiation between sunlight available and vitamin D available through diet, recalculated independently for every population on Earth. Skin color equals sunlight available minus dietary vitamin D, balanced against cancer risk. That is the entire equation. Every population on Earth solved it slightly differently based on their unique environment and food sources. None of this happened in a single lifetime. None of it happened in 10 lifetimes. These changes unfolded across hundreds of generations, each one slightly different from the last, invisible within any single human lifespan. Evolution does not work on the scale of human patience. It works on the scale of geological time. What feels permanent and unchanging to us is, biologically speaking, just one frame in an extremely long film still playing. When different populations eventually met each other again after tens of thousands of years apart, they looked at strangers and saw difference. But underneath the skin, every single one of them carried the exact same African ancestry. Genetically speaking, the differences in skin color represent an incredibly tiny fraction of total human DNA. A handful of genes out of roughly 20,000. Skin color is biologically minor, but historically treated as everything. Throughout history, this single adaptive trait, shaped purely by sunlight and diet, was used to justify slavery, colonialism, and discrimination. None of it had any basis in the actual biological story we just walked through. Understanding the real science does not erase history, but it does strip away the false foundations underneath it. Skin color was never a hierarchy. It was always just sunlight, latitude, diet, and biology working things out. Every continent, every population, every skin tone, all connected by the same ancestral starting point, the same evolutionary pressures, and the same fundamental biological needs. One species, endlessly adapting to wherever it found itself. So when you see someone with a different skin tone than yours, you are not seeing a different kind of human. You are seeing a different chapter of the exact same survival story written by the exact same sun. Let's revisit something important. This entire process began with one population in Africa. Every adaptation, every variation, every skin tone on Earth today traces back through an unbroken chain to that single starting point in history. Scientists today can actually predict roughly what skin tone a population should have just by knowing their ancestral latitude. The correlation between UV intensity and historical skin pigmentation is remarkably strong across almost every region. Even high-altitude populations had their own unique pressures. At extreme elevation, UV radiation is actually stronger despite cooler temperatures because there is less atmosphere to filter it. Skin adapted accordingly in these regions too. Indigenous Australians, despite migrating far from Africa tens of thousands of years ago, retained very dark skin. Because Australia sits under intense UV radiation similar to equatorial regions. The environment, not the migration distance, determined the outcome. This is the key insight. It was never really about distance from Africa at all. It was always about UV exposure wherever populations ended up living. Geography mattered, but only because of what geography meant for sunlight. Every baby born today inherits this ancient calibration system from their parents. A genetic instruction manual written by thousands of generations of ancestors responding to their own specific environment and survival pressures. But here is something fascinating. Modern humans now move across the planet faster than evolution could ever react. A person with skin adapted for Scandinavia can now live permanently under tropical sun within a single lifetime. Their ancestors spent tens of thousands of years adapting away from UV protection. Now suddenly that same skin is exposed to intense tropical UV again. Sunburn is essentially a mismatch between ancient adaptation and modern movement. The reverse happens too. A person with skin adapted for intense equatorial sun, now living in a low sunlight northern country, may struggle to synthesize enough vitamin D. The exact same problem ancient humans faced, just compressed. This is exactly why vitamin D deficiency remains common today in people whose ancestors lived near the equator but who now live in northern cities. The ancient mismatch never disappeared. We just invented a workaround for it. Step back far enough, and the whole story becomes almost poetic. One population, one continent, one sun, and then a slow, patient, 300,000-year experiment in adapting the exact same body to every environment imaginable. 3 molecules: melanin, folate, and vitamin D. 3 tiny biological players locked in an invisible balancing act that quietly determined the appearance of every human population that has ever existed on this entire planet. And one star, 93 million miles away, completely indifferent to all of it, yet somehow responsible for one of the most visible and most discussed physical traits in the entire history of our species. Think about it this way. Every bone in your body, every successful pregnancy in your family line, every ancestor who survived long enough to have children, all of it was shaped in part by this exact biological negotiation. If even one link in that chain had failed, if one ancestor had gotten too much UV damage or too little vitamin D, you would not exist. Every person alive today is the result of millions of successful biological compromises. Skin color, in the end, is simply evidence of success. Evidence that your specific lineage solved the puzzle of where they lived well enough to survive, reproduce, and eventually produce you, sitting here right now. So now when someone asks why skin color varies across the world, you know the real answer. It is not random. It is not arbitrary. It is the visible result of an ancient, ongoing negotiation with sunlight itself. From one dark skin population in Africa to every shade of human skin that exists today, this is one of the longest, slowest, most quietly dramatic stories ever told. And it is still being told right now. Through every generation, every migration, every environment, the sun has been quietly writing its signature onto human bodies. Not with malice, not with favoritism, just with the cold, consistent logic of survival and adaptation. So look at your hand again. Really look at it. Every line, every shade, every tone is a small piece of a 300,000-year-old story still unfolding inside your own body right now. Every line, every shade is a piece of a 300,000-year story. But that story is not finished yet. Not even close. Because evolution is not the only way your skin responds to sunlight. There's also tanning. A short-term emergency defense your body activates within hours of UV exposure, completely separate from your inherited baseline skin tone. When UV hits your skin, cells called melanocytes panic and start producing extra melanin immediately. This is your body's rapid response team, deploying emergency sunscreen on the spot, in real time, without asking permission. But not everyone tans the same way. People whose ancestors lived at middle latitudes often tan easily, a leftover seasonal adaptation. People whose ancestors lived at extreme latitudes often cannot tan at all and simply burn instead. A sunburn is not skin protecting itself successfully. It is skin failing to protect itself fast enough. The redness is inflammation, a sign that UV damage has already occurred before melanin could respond in time. Freckles tell a related but separate story. They appear when melanin production is uneven rather than smooth, often in people with lighter skin whose pigment genes produce melanin in small concentrated clusters instead of evenly. Red hair is part of this same story. The gene most commonly associated with red hair also reduces the ability to produce dark melanin, which is why red hair so often appears alongside very fair, easily burned skin. Then there is albinism, a condition where the body produces almost no melanin at all regardless of ancestry or latitude. It occurs in every population on Earth and shows just how fragile this entire pigment system really is. Today, skin cancer rates vary dramatically by ancestry and by where people actually live. Fair-skinned populations living near the equator face dramatically elevated melanoma risk, a direct modern echo of an ancient mismatch never resolved. And vitamin D deficiency remains shockingly common in the modern world. Studies estimate that roughly 1 billion people worldwide have insufficient levels, especially those with darker skin living far from the equator where their ancestors evolved. Modern lifestyles make this worse. We spend most of our lives indoors, under artificial light, wearing clothing that covers nearly everything. Our bodies are biologically calibrated for a world that mostly no longer exists. Some countries responded by fortifying common foods with vitamin D, essentially recreating the ancient hunter-gatherer diet artificially. Milk, cereal, and orange juice now quietly compensate for sunlight our bodies no longer receive. There's something else happening too. Global migration and intermarriage are mixing skin tone genes faster than ever before in human history, creating combinations evolution never specifically designed for any particular environment. Skin color has never actually existed in neat categories. It exists on a continuous spectrum, with thousands of subtle gradations between the darkest and lightest extremes, each one a slightly different answer to the same ancient question. So where does this story go from here? With global travel, indoor living, and artificial vitamin D, the original selection pressures are weakening. What happens to human skin color over the next 10,000 years? Some scientists predict that as global populations mix more freely, average skin tones worldwide may gradually converge toward intermediate shades over many thousands of years, simply through ordinary genetic blending across generations. Others point out that technology may simply remove the pressure altogether. If sunlight stops mattering for health because of supplements, fortified food, and indoor living, skin color may eventually become evolutionarily neutral, just another trait. And then there's an even stranger possibility. If humans ever live permanently somewhere other than Earth, under a different star with a completely different UV spectrum, this entire story may begin again from scratch. A population living under artificial light on Mars or beneath a dimmer star entirely would face brand new selection pressures. Skin color, once again, could become a survival tool shaped by forces we cannot yet predict. But for now, here on Earth, the story remains beautifully simple at its core. One sun, one ancestral population, countless environments, and an endlessly patient biological system still quietly doing its job, generation after generation. Let's recap the whole journey. Dark skin first, born from cancer protection and folate preservation under the African sun. Then migration, then weaker sunlight, then vitamin D pressure, then farming, then lighter skin again and again. 3 molecules, 1 star, tens of thousands of years. That is the entire mechanism behind one of the most visually obvious yet most misunderstood traits in all of human biology, distilled down to its absolute essentials. And perhaps the most important takeaway of all is this. Every person you have ever judged, admired, feared, or loved based partly on their skin color was simply carrying the result of their ancestors' encounter with sunlight. Nothing more, nothing less. No hidden meaning. No hierarchy, no deeper significance beyond biology responding to light, exactly as it has done for every living thing on this planet for billions and billions of years. It all began here, under this sun, with these ancestors, and it continues right now, in your skin, in your blood, in the quiet biological machinery that has never once stopped running since the very beginning. Here is something worth pausing on. The human brain notices skin color almost instantly, within milliseconds of seeing a face. But that instinct evolved for recognizing kin and strangers, not for ranking value or worth. For most of human history, everyone you ever met looked roughly like you. Your tribe, your village, your region, all sharing similar ancestry and similar skin tones. Meeting someone visibly different was an extremely rare event. When ancient trade routes eventually connected distant populations, people encountered visible difference for the first time in generations. Curiosity, fear, and fascination followed, long before any of the social structures we recognize today existed. Trade, exploration, and eventually empire building dramatically accelerated how often humans encountered people with different ancestry and different skin tones, setting the stage for centuries of both exchange and tragic misunderstanding. For centuries, people invented elaborate, incorrect explanations for skin color differences, rooted in myth, religion, and pseudoscience. It took until relatively recently for genetics to finally reveal the actual, much simpler biological truth. Modern DNA sequencing technology, developed only in the last few decades, finally allowed scientists to read this story directly from ancient bones. Before that, we were essentially guessing based on indirect evidence alone. The vitamin D hypothesis for skin color evolution was only properly proposed in the 1960s and 1970s. Ancient DNA confirming the Cheddar Man findings only came out in 2018. This science is younger than you might think, and research is still happening right now. New ancient DNA samples are analyzed every year, often revising or refining what we thought we knew about specific populations, specific timelines, and specific genetic pathways involved. There's still so much we do not fully understand. Why exactly did some populations depigment faster than others? What other genes might still be involved? How diet interacted with climate in ways we have not yet discovered. Every new skeleton recovered from an ancient burial site is a potential new chapter in this story. Each one carries tiny fragments of DNA that, once decoded, can rewrite assumptions that have stood for decades. Museums and educational institutions around the world are increasingly presenting this story accurately, replacing outdated and harmful narratives with the evidence-based explanation that biology has actually given us all along. Imagine if every child learned this story early, not as a footnote, but as a foundational piece of understanding what it means to be human. How differently might conversations about race and identity unfold from there? In a strange way, every human alive carries the potential for every skin tone within their genetic history. Given different ancestors, a different latitude, a different sun, you could have been born looking completely different. None of us chose where our ancestors ended up. None of us chose how much sunlight they received. None of us chose the genetic dice rolls that produced our specific shade. It was simply geography, time, and chance. And yet that same sun shines on everyone equally today. The same star that started this entire process 300,000 years ago still rises every morning over every person, regardless of what their skin looks like. Maybe that is the most beautiful part of this entire story. The sun that shaped us so dramatically over hundreds of thousands of years never stopped being the same sun. It simply kept shining, and we kept adapting. So here is the full arc one more time. Africa, dark skin, migration, weaker sun, vitamin D crisis, farming, faster change, convergent evolution, blue eyes, modern mixing, and an open, unwritten future still ahead of us. Every time you catch a reflection, somewhere in that image is a message from your ancestors. A record of where they lived, what they ate, how they survived, and ultimately, how they made it possible for you to exist. Every handprint left on every cave wall across every continent, regardless of the skin tone of the hand that made it, tells the exact same underlying story. Survival, adaptation, continuity, the same species, endlessly resourceful. The sun never asked any of us to be a certain color. It never asked anything at all. It just existed 93 million miles away, doing what stars do, while life on Earth quietly figured out how to survive it. We are one species, one tree, with countless branches, each shaped by its own patch of sky, its own latitude, its own centuries of quiet adjustment. Different leaves, same roots, same trunk, same origin point in Africa. If this video changed how you think about something as simple as your own hand, that is the whole point. Science is not just about distant facts. It is about understanding the story written into your own body. And skin color is only one chapter. Your eyes, your hair, your height, your lung capacity, even your ability to digest milk, all carry similar stories of ancient environments quietly written into your biology right now. Step back far enough, and every human being on Earth right now is simply one small, glowing dot shaped by the same star, descended from the same ancestors, still figuring out together what comes next. Every skin tone is an answer to a question asked by a star. And now, you know the answer. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take a closer look at the world and at yourself.